Museum of History Studios.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are taking you on a journey that is outside of the Civil War. It is, every once in a while, I like to do this. History, you know, it's all, you got to study it all, right? And it's all relatable somehow. And I think for those of you who have been patrons for a long time, you know that I do these shows when I can called Combat Stories. And I speak with obviously modern day combat veterans to talk about their experience, because I want you to have an idea of what it's like for the Civil War soldier. Because I think, based on my own interpretation of the Civil War, in the past at least, that we tend to romanticize warfare in this country, and it's because of Hollywood mostly. And we can't talk to Civil War veterans, so I can't ask them what is it like when you hear a bullet whiz by your ear, but I can ask a modern day soldier, and even though they're different weapons, different wars, you know, mortal combat and the feelings that come with it are probably still the same regardless of what war we're talking about. And so anyway, this is one of those departures from the Civil War that might help you get an idea, or at least an appreciation for what these guys go through. We're talking today with Andrew Biggio, and it's about his book called The Rifle. And his book, The Rifle 2, where did that go?
Here it is.
Here it is. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The Rifle 2, Joe, you could just go to 1 and 2, is coming out on September 19th. So by the time this show comes out, it will either be just about to be released or already have been released. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Well, thank
love
you.
being here in Gettysburg, and, you know, been hanging out with Eric. I'm proud to serve on the board of his museum, the Gettysburg Museum of History, and I love being in the center of so much history here. And
we should mention that Eric is sitting right here, and he set this up for us, and so we need to thank you for that, Eric. So, all right, let's talk about you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and how did you get to eventually write the Rifle?
Yeah, I am from Boston, Mass, born and bred in the whole area. You know, from when I was a young kid, I always wanted to be in the military, become a veteran, and serve. I used to be just really intrigued and drawn to veterans. I remember loving seeing them in the parades, in the St. Patrick's Day parade, the Veterans Day parades. But, you know, I remember when I really first had a drawn to these veterans is, you know, back in the day, they used to stand outside like your local grocery store and collect money for poppies.
Yep.
And today's kids will never. And I remember every time I give $1 and I get a poppy, I'm like, yeah, that guy was so cool. I want to go back and give him another $1. And next thing you know, all my friends are buying candy, and I'm got no money because I gave it all to the guy with the cool hat.
Right.
And our Pearl Harbor happened, our 9/11 happened, and I said, shit, you know, like, this war's going to be over by the time I get out of, you know, school. And it wasn't. And I joined.
So you were having FOMO.
Yeah.
You were afraid that you would not be able to. Yeah.
Right. And here my parents are like, we paid for you to go to Catholic school. You're going to college. I'm like, hell no, I'm going to miss this bloodshed in Iraq. Yeah. So I joined the Marines in 2006, deployed to Iraq, came home, began college, and then got to go to Afghanistan too. So I did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now I've been on the Boston Police for about I've been a police officer for about 10 years, and seen just as much crazy stuff on the police force as I did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Believe it or not, crazy to say that.
I believe it.
Yeah. And but yeah, that's the basis, and I can go into how I got into all of this stuff in a minute.
Well, so you're in Iraq and Afghanistan. How many times did you go over?
Twice.
And how would you describe your experience over there?
Yeah, you know, getting to Iraq, I always tell everyone in my Iraq portion is I was kind of there as things were. I was part of President Bush's surge.
Okay.
So, you know, the guys who saw the most combat in Iraq per se were like the 2004 guys, the 2004 guys. You know, just the rise of the insurgency, you know, the Battle of Fallujah, the invasion of Iraq, like my buddy here, Brian, on the left of me, who I'm sure will introduce himself in a minute. So I was part of the surge. I got to go over there. I spent 9 months, and hard work. My commanding officer actually survived the collapse of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. His name was Major Armis. He was a Secret Service agent and my major of Fox Company. And man, he was just really hard on us to survive. And you know what? By the end of that deployment, I was a warrior. I mean, I was one of the best shots in the company, going against snipers and things like that. And I think Major Armis for really drilling us hard. You know, he was a combat Marine. In 2004, so like I said, he was a Secret Service agent during Ground Zero. There's a picture of him coming out of the rubble with a woman on his shoulders. He really was a beast. I heard he retired now, so.
We have a listener who survived the collapse of the, which was the first one to fall? The South Tower, right? It was the second one hit, but the first to fall. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So he was coming out of the North Tower. Just as the South Tower started to collapse.
Right.
And he had no freaking clue what was going on.
Yeah.
And somehow pulled himself out of the rubble and everything. It's an amazing story. So your major was there as well.
Yes. So he had a high expectation of us. And I remember him when he gave us a briefing before we went to Iraq. And, you know, and he was referring to basically Islamic terrorism, like, and, you know you guys are about to be away from your family. I know, but these motherfuckers started it, you know, and we were like, yeah, you know, like, and he gave such a great speech. And I got to actually hang out with him about 5-6 years ago. I invited him back down to Boston for a fundraiser for another wounded Marine. And he came and he delivered a speech. He's like, I'm not an apologist, you know. He's like, but if you F with this country, we'll come knock on your door and punch you right in the fucking face. And everybody, he had the crowd going nuts, all these bikers and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd say I went to Afghanistan, and that was probably the bloodier of my tours. My battalion took about 50 casualties. We lost a few dogs, canines, bomb squad, yeah. I'm talking police lingo now. Explosive ordnance dogs.
Right.
And I was attached to Afghan Police Highway Patrol, which this police department wasn't even particularly recognized by the country of Afghanistan as a legitimate police department. But in that region, they were respected as police culturally. And I saw those guys get killed and shot and things like that, training them, being with them. You know, so. Was
Afghanistan like the Wild West?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Because everybody I talked to that's been there, that's kind of what it sounds like to me.
It was. I think my squad found 42 IEDs alone on one stretch of road. And sometimes we'd miss them, and civilians would get killed, or Afghan police would get killed. And that's how my first book starts off, talking about one of the incidents where these Afghan police who were, you know, the guys were mixed feelings of whether you could trust them or not and stuff like that. But I developed a good relationship with them. One of them even taught me how to drive stick shift in a truck. You know,
you never knew how to drive stick before that? Really?
Mm-mm.
How old are you?
I'm 36 now. I was probably 24 then.
Okay. So yeah, I guess your generation doesn't know that.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, I'm sure the country dudes in my platoon knew how to do it, but
yeah,
you know, I was a city-it from Boston.
Yeah, a city-it.
You know.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, the lack of human life in my experience was just, Afghanistan was just different. I mean, everything from animals to humans to everything. One thing that bothers me the most is I never talk about this particular, and maybe I might have mentioned it drunk to somebody, but one thing that really bothered me, and I think they were trying to lure us in for an ambush, is I watched an Afghan guy take a dog, tie it to the back of a moped, or excuse me, a motorcycle. Again, I'm mixing police and tie it to the back of a motorcycle and drag it around me in a circle over and over again at my little police station. And this dog didn't die right away, you know. And he would drive and there's this dust cloud following around, and he would stop, and this dog would get up. Like, why are you doing this? You know, he'd go over, kick it, then drive off again, drive back and forth. And he knows how Americans feel about animals. He's trying to lure us out there to, you know. And so I'm telling my commander, and they don't give a shit. You know, I'm telling the other Afghan they don't care, you know, Afghan police. So I'm trying to shoot pin flares at this guy, and I'm doing everything except actually pulling the trigger, which would have put me
That's what you wanted to do.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to watch this whole time. And then finally he just disappeared into the sunset, but still with the dog tag tied behind the thing. But for some reason, that bothers me more than a human.
No, I understand that.
You know?
I have a friend who's a history teacher. He used to teach middle school, and he would show, there's a famous picture from the Battle of Antietam of a white horse laying, it looks like he's just sleeping in the middle of the field, but he's actually dead, right? And he would mix it in with photos of dead soldiers, and so he'd play the slides, and the kids would look, and it would get to the horse, and the whole class would go, "Oh,
right."
They're innocent. We drag them into these things.
Yes.
We drag them into our stupid squabbles that we can't, settle at a table. Instead, we have to go on a battlefield. And these poor animals are dragged into it. And yeah, of course, I totally understand how that would still bother you to this day.
Yeah.
It's going to bother me for a while having heard the story. Because I just got a puppy. So thanks a lot, Andy.
Yeah, and it's like, he'd go over to slap it with his sandal, kick it, get back on the bike, doing it again, dragging it around. I'm like... And I started thinking, I'm like, maybe this dog bit his kid or something. But I'm like, what am I talking about? Every household has an AK-47 in Afghanistan. He just blew his head off.
Yeah.
He was trying to lure us into an attack, absolutely, or get us to run over an IED.
Yep.
You know? So, but yeah, that's the beginning of my OIF, OEF stories, and that eventually spider into this whole other veterans advocacy stuff.
So, okay, so now you're done. You come home. Was it easy to adjust back to civilian life?
You know, for me it was, and I thank my parents for that. And not a lot of veterans have a good network system, and I think guys fall through the cracks like that. My parents are strict. They're like, yeah, I don't care if you're a U.S. Marine, been to Iraq and Afghanistan. You're going to school. You're going to college. Give us your money you earn too, and that's putting in a savings account. And I'm like, no, I want to spend on strippers. You know,
Yeah.
Which I did, like a lot of it. So thank God they did take some money away from me. It was like strippers and DVD players for the headrests of my Volkswagen Touareg. Like, why?
Well, whatever.
You know,
you were young.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the first. You give any 20-year-old kid $30,000. You know, because you're not spending money over there.
Right.
They're probably gonna blow it, and
that's a fortune to a 20-year-old kid.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you come back, you have an easy time adjusting.
I think I did, but
compared to other people that you know.
Yeah, of course. You know, I fortunately, knock on wood, I never had one of those situations where my best friend died in my arms, or my whole squad was killed, or those guys. You know, but even those guys, I feel like, are able to turn their tragedy into motivation or a mission. And like my buddy Brian here, I've never heard him complain once. Never heard my buddy Brian, to my left of me, who lost his arm and his leg in Fallujah. I've never heard him complain.
Do you want to join us now, Brian, now that he's dragged you into, into it? All right, Brian. Brian, what's your last name? Johnston. Welcome. So go ahead. You tell us your story there.
I was in Iraq late 2004. My unit was part of Phantom Fury going into Fallujah to take Fallujah back. And I was on top of a vehicle when a couple of IEDs went off and ended up losing an arm and a leg as a result.
Immediately, or did you have to have them amputated?
They were amputated. The arm was kind of hanging there. You know.
What is that? Do you remember much of the moment it happened?
Yeah.
So you didn't lose consciousness or anything?
No.
So bang, and the next thing you know, things aren't where God put them. If you don't mind, like what goes through your mind at that moment?
My first thought was get inside the track because I was on top of an Amtrak exposed.
Okay.
And I just rolled into the track and everybody unloaded. They dragged me out. The corpsman went to work, started doing tourniquets. Just waited for an ambulance.
And I got to add, because he's not a great storyteller. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
So Operation Phantom Fury, as people know, we gave the insurgents, we're coming in. After they killed all those contractors, strung them up on a bridge, burned them alive.
I remember that, yeah.
They said, we're coming in. You can leave, evacuate. Anyone that stays is getting treated like enemy.
Okay.
All the Marines are ready to go in there. There's not enough room for the guys inside the tracks. So some lieutenant thinks it's okay for these guys to right on top. of the tracks going into
Oh.
a city full of insurgents.
Like they're in Kelly's Heroes or something,
Right.
coming in on the tank.
These guys hit, you know, we can say anti-tank mine or, you know, they're. And Brian's, everyone inside shielded. Brian's on top. So the shrapnel went up. He falls inside of the track on the laps of the guys, and he's bleeding all over them. And they're like, get off me. And he says, I can't move.
Yeah.
And, yeah, sorry, Brian. I had to paint the picture.
Okay.
That
So
was a much better story.
That's about
an arm and leg.
yeah.
You know, I love Mickey's.
So now, did you serve together? How do you know each other?
Yeah, we met in the Marine Corps, especially when he was healing.
Okay.
And then we became more closer friends when I asked if I could do a motorcycle charity ride for him.
Okay.
And then
got it.
he's been following
So
me
that was
since.
your idea.
Yeah. Did you ever feed a puppy in Puerto Rico and it just follows you?
I actually did feed a puppy in Puerto Rico once. Yes, I did. Right outside my hotel. And so that's what Brian is. Brian's the puppy that you fed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I give him Jack Daniels, not.
Of course.
Not,
Of course. Well,
Scooby
and that'll
Snack.
keep everybody coming back. It's Jack Daniels. So, Brian, you live in Utah now. Where'd you grow up?
Connecticut.
Connecticut. And what made you want to join up?
I guess I always had a sort of interest in the military growing up, and one day I came home and my brother's recruiter was there, and kind of that was it.
Okay. So the recruiter's there, and you're like, this is a good idea.
It's like, yeah, I put it off long enough.
And what made you think of the Marines? Just because the recruiter was from the Marines?
Dad was a Marine, brother's a Marine.
Got it. So it's like a family thing. And all right, so jump in anytime if you have something you want to add, okay?
All right.
All right. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. All right, so the rifle. Let's get to the rifle.
Sure.
First of all, you have the rifle with you. Would you show it to us?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start with that.
Yeah. Let me. I guess I'll talk about the first signature and then grab and show everybody if that's all right.
Yeah. So, well, all right. Here's what we'll do. So, the idea to do this, did you just want someone to sign? So, what it is he's got a rifle. It's an M1 Garand, signed by World War II veterans.
Yep.
Okay. Why'd you want to talk to him in the first place? Or was it just to get the signatures?
But again, I did not have the same combat experience as my buddy Brian here, or a decent amount of veterans, I guess, of, you know, all stuff that would probably, me being a bitch, put me up. You know, if I was him, I'd be like,
You'd be catatonic.
Right.
So would I.
you know,
Yeah.
he's a tough guy. And
And he clearly he could take jokes about it because you're
Absolutely.
sitting here busting his balls.
yeah, he's some lady last night at the bar. She's like, "How it happened to you?" He's like, "Lawnmower accident." I'm like, "Yeah."
But you have to have a sense of humor about this stuff, otherwise it'll eat you up.
And I was
right?
like, "We both worked for John Deere. He fell during the trading." During the
I was pushed.
I was pushed into the lawnmower.
So yeah, but I did have survivor's guilt coming home because I had to pass this street sign every day that said Andrew Biggio Square.
Yes.
In Massachusetts, we name the intersections of our small towns after guys killed in action, World War II. My grandfather's brother, who I'm named after, was killed in action. He was 19 years old. The first Andrew Biggio, the real hero, was killed in action at age 19. So every day I had to drive past that sign. And it was getting to me a little bit. I guess I was kind of drifting off and meeting so many guys like Brian. You know, I started really going out of my way to help guys that were severely wounded, because in Iraq and Afghanistan, it didn't matter how hot shit you were. It didn't matter if you were special forces or a truck driver. All it matters was where you stepped or where you drove in the wrong location and you were an amputee, period. And Afghanistan, everyone knows anything could be an IED out there. If they can take some homemade explosive, right, fertilizer, any type of HME, they can turn it into something just like this that's enough to blow your leg off. It's not that image everyone has in their head of the, you know, the 155 shell being loaded into the ground. I mean, yeah, if you want to break a Humvee in half. But they got really good with the homemade explosives that were really hard for our metal detectors to pick up in Afghanistan. And sometimes the dogs would even miss them. I have a friend where they sent two dogs into a house. The dogs came out, didn't hit for the homemade explosive. He walked right in, boom, both his legs gone. And he was with me. That was Greg Karen out in Connecticut. And so we had 3 Afghans. Oh, Jesus. You know what? I don't know. Maybe there was 4 or 5 of them that got blown up. There was so many body parts, I couldn't remember how many guys there actually was.
Sure.
And they're getting piled in the back of this truck. And I was going to help them unload their dead friends, and my interpreter comes running over. I know I'm going. This all leads up to the rifle.
Go ahead.
trust me.
Yeah.
My interpreter comes up and says, "Hey, they don't want any non-Muslims touching these bodies of these Afghan police." And I'm like, "Oh, thank God, I'm like, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. I believe in you, God, today." But so they have these two scrawny little friggin' Afghans, okay? And they're going to unload these dead corpses. And I don't know if anyone's picked up a dead body that really, like...
Dead weight.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can actually misinterpret which weight you... If he's missing an arm, he's going to swing go this way. If he's missing a leg or an ass cheek. Literally, that's what I saw.
Sure.
And they drop this corpse. And, he's missing the guy was missing both his legs, and he had two raw kneecaps just dangling. And I remember they misjudged the weight. The guy fell off the tail bed of the truck and went clonk, slank, on the ground. Fast forward 2 years, 3 years later, I'm in Stop and Shop, and this woman's juggling this watermelon, trying to put it in her carriage, falls and hits the ground. And it was the same noise. That melon hitting the ground was the same noise of that guy's kneecaps hitting the cement that day. And I actually was sick. I actually got a little sick to it.
Yeah.
I was sick. I leave the house. I go by Andrew Biggio Square again. It's haunting me in a way, I guess. I don't want to say haunting because that's not right. But I said, you know what? I want to find out what happened to Andrew Biggio on that hill in Italy in 1944. What happened to him that didn't happen to me? Why is he dead and I'm alive? Why do I get to enjoy my life and go to college and live a life and chase girls? And
this is your great uncle.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who I'm named after. And so I went to my grandmother's house because she told me she had saved all the letters he wrote home before he was killed. Because I wanted to start looking for clues, things like that. And I pull out this letter. And it's so funny because we always say, like, the military makes a man out of you and you're a hardcore. Every letter he wrote home was to his mom. Yeah. And that's the same thing when I was in boot camp. And I think a lot of veterans can know your mom becomes your best friend. Yeah. He had two brothers and a dad, and every letter was Dear Mom. First letter I pulled was, Dear Mom, today we fired the M1 Garand Rifle. I like this weapon. It's going to be better. I literally didn't even finish the letter. I had to go buy an M1 Garand. I wanted to feel what he felt, hold what he held. Okay. He was this little infantry kid, 18 when he wrote the letter.
Right.
So I go and buy an M1 Garand. I take it to family dinner like the next week, and everyone's like, "Why'd you bring a gun to dinner? Like, what are you doing?" But I'm like, "No, this is what Uncle Andy had." I'm showing my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and they've used it as just a gun. And I'm like, "No, this is bummer." Wind knocked out of my sails. So go back to my house. This is bringing up the rifle with the signatures. I said, my neighbor, Joe Drago, he fought in the Battle of Okinawa. He was a Marine. He'll appreciate this. I knock on his door. And this is when I knew, like, it was a race against time because Joe used to be able to walk around, come to Marine Corps birthdays, celebrate. Right. He is bound to his recliner. His legs have gotten really skinny, arms skinny. He's not getting out. He's 92, I think.
At this point.
I put that M1 in his hands. He shouldered it. He's waving it around. He's smiling ear to ear. I'm like, this kid just transformed into a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Battle of Okinawa for like 3 hours. And it was the first time I felt ordinary again. Like, we always paint the World War II generation as the greatest generation. My grandfather never talked about it. And, the World War II guys. But he finally normalized war for me, that it wasn't black and white. They were not just the greatest generation. And the stuff they did on Okinawa would put Marines today in prison.
Yes.
Case in point, he literally says, I can't believe that you guys got in trouble for pissing on dead Taliban.
Yeah.
That's nothing compared to what we used to do. Yeah. That's a direct quote from Joe Drago.
Yeah. I love that part.
I company 22nd Marine Regiment, 6th Marine Division.
Yeah.
And he goes, I got something I want to give you. And I'm like, and these could be yours now. I go in his sock drawer, I pull out a velvet Crown Royal bag, and it's Japanese gold teeth.
Yes.
And he's giving these to me, and of course my Marine boner's like, like this. Fucking. But at the meantime, but I'm like, I felt like at that point I didn't have to hide in the shadows of the greatest generation, and that I felt normal, and it was turning into this great therapy session that they were probably just as bad and did some gnarly things to win World War II, but politically both sides were on their team, and they got good PR and good propaganda, and But I mean, he was crying, talking about the civilian deaths on Okinawa and at nighttime just using that machine gun on anything that moved, and the Okinawans that got killed. And I said, Joe, I always want to remember this. Will you sign this rifle? Sign your name on it. And when he signed it, and I left his house, I knew I was in a race against time, and I looked down at that name and I said, I want to get as many names as possible. And now, drum roll, please.
See, I could do sound effects at the drop of a hat. Here we go.
We got over 320 names on here.
Would you lacquer that?
Yeah, I put polyurethane on it. Excuse me. Sorry, Brian. It's not loaded, I promise. We don't want to have you lose your other arm.
Kind of need that side.
Yeah. So, 300 in...
You might have to roll back a little bit that way so that you can just project your voice so people can hear it.
Yeah, 320 names on here on this M1 Garand.
Yeah.
And I tried to represent the whole war on this rifle.
So you got Europe and the Pacific?
Europe, the Pacific, Medal of Honor recipients, cooks, sailors, airmen, B-17 pilots, P-47 pilots, Navajo code talkers, black tankers, Japanese Americans who were fought in Italy.
So anybody.
Prisoners of war. I wanted to represent the whole war. If you name a battle, someone on here is on it, even ones that battles didn't even know about. Every branch is recognized on there. I tried to do everything culturally, ethnically, religious, battlefield-wise, branch-wise, occupation-wise, to try to represent everyone who had a helping hand in the Second World War.
Yeah, yeah.
And
may I see it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, look at all these names. Look at that. They got some pretty good handwriting for being so old, you know? Usually it's like all shaky and everything, but this is...
we got the first transgender World War II veteran up there. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. That's the only thing I didn't get the chance to find one from.
No, you didn't even find any of those?
No.
That's strange. Let's see. Yeah, Paul Perry? Is that Paul Perry? Is that right?
Yep, Paul Perry, 88th Infantry Division, 351st Regiment.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Italy. You know how I met him?
No.
I was a police officer, and this guy is asking me for directions on the train at his age, how to get to the VA hospital.
Right.
And I said, sir, I got to ask you, how old are you? He goes, why? He's got mad. I asked him, I'm like, he's like, I was born in 1925. I go, sir, I'm sorry. I don't see many people like you wandering the city and taking the train. Where are you heading? He's like, I'm going to the VA hospital. I said, I have this M1 Garand in the trunk of my car. I swear to God.
And this is while you're on duty?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you would carry it at work?
I would bring it to work because you never knew what kind of... I'd get calls to people's houses like, Grandpa can't get up. And I find out the dude was like... on Iwo Jima,
right?
You know,
I'll get you back in your chair if you'll sign my rifle. Right,
Correct.
I gotcha. Okay.
And so, I was like, I went out to the back of my car, was parked behind the train station, and he signed the rifle, Paul Perry. Yeah. And like 2 years ago, I think I was wondering where he was. I looked him up and I found his obituary. I was like, oh damn it.
Oh yeah, that's always sad. This is pretty awesome. So what do you plan to do with the rifle itself? Like, just keep it, or you want to put it in a museum somewhere?
Yeah, no, I made a promise
here in Gettysburg.
I made a promise to all these guys, if they let me in their house, told their personal stories, signed my rifle. I went to coast to coast. This rifle took me all over the world. I told them that it would be on display in a museum one day. And what I didn't tell them was my man cave museum in my basement. All right? No.
You're going to hog it.
Yeah, no, it looks good there now, but it's that's still yet to be determined. And Eric obviously has offered me to actually display it, which is the most important thing to me.
Yeah, you got to display it.
A big name museum is great, but if they're going to huck it in storage or some curator is going to whatever with it, like, no, it's not happening.
No.
And the foot traffic in his museum are just as much as anyone else. What
are you talking? You're saying it like you're juxtaposing his museum with a big name museum. He is a big name museum.
He is. But the problem is, I told this one veteran who was anti-ponytail that he would not put it in anybody's...
Well, we'll have to cut that ponytail then. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. You know, he is a big museum. But I think what as a Marine, the first thing I did was I walked into the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I got this rifle. It's signed by over 300 veterans. It's spawned 2 books. Marines all over know it. There's about 80 Marines signed it. And they did not give 0 shits, you know?
That's a shame.
So once I had written off like the National World War II Museum and the Marine Corps Museum, then, you know, it's like, I got to put it in a museum that's going to display it and appreciate it. And Eric's number one.
You got to put it in one of those non-institutional museums, like Eric's. Like Eric's, to me, is a real museum.
Yeah.
And all these museums that are you know, these big monstrosities of buildings that look beautiful and the architecture's great, the design's great, but the amount of artifacts they have in there are like minuscule.
Absolutely.
And it's all about telling some bullshit story.
Yeah.
Like I can't stand those museums. They're so sterile.
I have a reason to believe that they're not going to display my...
Of course they're not going to display it.
So when I'm done touring with Rifle 2, it'll come to that point. Maybe it's supposed to be a traveling exhibit and it goes from museum to museum.
Well, I think it does for a time, but then after a while, I think it needs to be safely stored somewhere.
Yeah.
Like here in Gettysburg, at the Gettysburg Museum of History.
Oh, I was told it's Gettysburg.
No.
Okay.
It is Gettysburg. Do you go to Getty Gas or Get a Gas?
Gettysburg.
All right, so now let's get into Drago's story, though.
Yeah.
So he's your neighbor. You grew up with him right next door.
Yeah, so he was like, and I kind of regret saying this, but like a grump.
Yeah.
We'd ring his doorbell and we'd screw.
So you ring and run?
Yeah.
Okay, no wonder he was a grump.
Ding dong ditch.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Fiery bag of poop on the door.
No, not that far.
You didn't do that.
Yeah,
okay.
no.
You had standards.
Yeah, I had goddamn standards. Cried out loud. But stuff like screw with his wife and things. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just kidding. You know, rob him. You know,
Torture his dog.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, and it's so funny when I graduated Marine Corps boot camp, then I get the smile and the wave. You know, it's so.
Well, right. No, so because you mentioned that in the chapter about him, and so. Grumpy old man growing up, you know, if the ball goes over the
foul
fence.
Ball in his yard,
right.
Get the hell out of here.
He'll keep it, right?
Yeah.
And then you become a Marine. Mm-hmm. And suddenly now he's being nice. But as you say in the book, and by this I mean, you know, he waves.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
But that's a lot
That's
from
a
him.
lot. That's a change. Why did he change, you know?
Because you're a Marine. Mm-hmm. Now, you knew he was a Marine at this point?
I did, but I don't think I put 2 and 2 together of how bad World War II was and what the Marines did in the Pacific. And of course, I just knew he was a veteran, and that was it. I didn't care when I was a kid.
Sure, no, yeah.
Like, it's weird. I'm actually contradicting myself. I tell you how bad I wanted to be a veteran, but I didn't care. I guess there must have been a turning point where I started to felt probably like in 8th and 7th grade more heartfelt to the veterans. But I think before that, I was a wild one that didn't care. So
you were a kid. Most kids don't have a clue about anything.
Then when I got into the Marine Corps and started wearing the uniform, I forgot about who wore this uniform before me, where my unit even served in World War II. Like it was just get your own butt home.
What unit were you in?
I was it was in 2 different units. I was in 2nd Battalion, 25th Marines for my Iraq deployment, 1st Battalion, 25th Marines for my Afghanistan deployment.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, continue with the story. You become a Marine. When do you start talking to him to the point where you can go and have him sign the rifle?
Actually, when we became closer was when he walked in the door at the Pacific first episode airing in Boston at the JFK Library. He walks in with a 3-piece suit.
Really?
Yeah. And it was when Tom Hanks came and they were giving out tickets to any free Pacific veterans in the area, and he walked in and I had a beer with him, and it was the first time. So it was like 2008 or 8.
So now...
This is before the rifle project.
Right.
Yep.
So this is where you just start to make a connection with the guy aside from waving.
Yep.
Or putting firecrackers up his cat's butt.
Absolutely.
And you remember what you talk about while you're having this beer?
How he was the first wave in Okinawa.
Okay.
And that they didn't open fire right away. And that they waited till like they were near an airfield. And that was cool. And we were having a beer, and he had a little 6th Marine Division tie on him. And there was a lot of Pacific vets in this building, you know. I was meeting guys that... It was crazy. And then there was another guy that I used to sit rocking on his porch my whole life. he was there too. I'm like, wow, like he was an Iwo Jima vet. Last name was Raguchi, and so it was. I wasn't out of the Marines yet though, so I was like, cool, meet these guys. Yeah, get a picture. Then I think I still had to go to Afghanistan and stuff. So
Right. Okay. All right. Now, so then, and you do go to Afghanistan, and then you come back, and then at what point? How long are we talking after this conversation at the bar?
I think I got out of them. Oh yeah, so I think, I got out New Year's Day 2012 officially out of the military, and then I think in 2016 I went back to Joe's house.
So it was a while.
It was a while because it was 08, I think, was when the series came out, the Pacific. And so he was sitting in the recliner, and like I said, his arms and legs were like noodles, and I realized it was in a race against time and how many veterans would be left. And
Right.
And so that was like sign my rifle, and then I left from there, and I had to get someone from the European theater, and I had to get someone from this and that, and I'm hearing all these amazing stories. And then eventually I'm like, I have to put pen to paper. This has to be more than just a selfish,
Right.
cool thing to have in my man cave.
Yeah. So no. Okay. You bring it to him and you ask him to sign it. That's your original intention. And then in the handling of the piece, these guys start to be. They're 22 again or whatever, however old they were, and they're kind of like. They're not just holding it; they're like going through motions with it, and they're coming alive, right? They're starting to tell you stories.
I start to see everything. I mean, they're coming alive, they're telling stories, they're weeping. They start to deflect and talk about something else.
Yeah.
Their kids are pulling me aside and saying, hey, I never talked to my dad for 10 years. He was a drunk, angry bastard, and beat me and my whole family. And so I was starting to learn the psychology of like Greatest Generation, right? And so book one. So I got to a gentleman by the name of Clarence Cormier when I decided to start writing these stories. And Clarence was in the 106th Infantry Division. And for those who don't know that division, they had one of the biggest surrenders since the American Civil War. They surrendered, and historians argue, because I never like to put exact numbers, they surrendered between 7,000 and 8,000 men at the Battle of the Bulge. They were defending this area of St. Vith. They were in country for 2 weeks. They just got there. This was November. They were relatively, late in the war in Europe. And this guy could have fed me any BS story. I killed 10 Germans and I got surrender. I had to surrender. And instead, he's like, I didn't fire around. I wept like a baby. I hugged the ground. There was artillery going off all over around me. We were told we were going to the honeymoon sector of the Ardennes. They relieved the 2nd Infantry Division. There was nobody around. They said, you guys just got in country. Let's break you in this quiet area. Next thing you know, the trees are exploding, and there's 600 tanks, German tanks coming at you. They were right where the bulge broke. They're the hardest hit unit. 7,000 surrenders, and he's got a Mauser pointed in his face the next morning. The German takes off his shoes and takes his shoes because his shoes were newer. He just got to Europe.
Right.
Well, he can't fit his feet in the German shoes, so he has to cut the tops out so his toes are hanging out. And he gets marched onto a train, in a boxcar train, sent to Germany. Well, 2 American, and they're crushed inside of this.
Squeezed in.
Chest to chest. He couldn't even exhale. They're pissing all over each other, Then 2 American P-47 fighter planes see this German train. What do you think they do?
Oh, no. They strafe
Bad
it.
news. They're strafing it over and over again. They have no idea they're killing their own Americans. He's crying his eyes out. I never seen a 96-year-old man weep like this.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I had seen people get killed. I had been on the police force for a little bit. I thought I considered myself a tough guy, whatever. And seeing this 96-year-old man weep in front of me was very taken back by it. And the Germans, I guess, decide to break open these boxcars and let the Americans out. And the Americans get on the ground. They form the letters POW with their bodies.
Wow.
And the planes are coming in again for another round. And he's crying, telling me this. I could hear the engines getting closer and closer and hoping they recognize POW on the ground. And sure enough, he said, I looked up and the plane came out of the dive. And the guy pulled back the canopy and was waving a kerchief at him. And I have this all on video. And Clarence is crying, telling this story. And his daughter grabs me in the hallway and she's like, I knew my dad was a POW, but I never heard him tell this story before.
Wow.
So I said, if she's never heard the story, and he's a daughter, how many people in this country haven't heard it? And I said, I got to write these stories. And for a kid who was a average C student and didn't like school, proud to say that I've gotten rid of over between 30 and 40,000 units, copies of the rifle. It became a #1 bestseller.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, because I chose like another 19 stories similar that people may have never heard of.
Yeah. And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
I can't imagine that being stuck in that train and, you know, your own people are unwittingly
Oh, and then how
firing
about
on you.
all right, the plane's gone, get back on. And you're in your friend's guts
Yeah,
and brains.
yeah.
You're standing on dead guys. He said the Germans rolled the dead bodies out of the train, left them on the side of the road, and the train took off again. So the train wasn't demobilized, you know?
Right, right.
And they got to sit there now with bullet holes in the train. You're in your friend's blood. And he was part of, everyone's heard of the Bataan Death March in the Philippines.
Right.
People don't know, but in Europe, they had a couple similar marches like that. They weren't as bad as Bataan, but some guys were marched to a Stalag that ended up getting taken over by the Germans on the other side of Germany, and then they had to get marched back. He was only 50 guys left in his march. He said he never slept under a roof the whole time he was in Europe.
So rain or shine.
He never slept under a roof. And in the wintertime, they would pig pile on top of each other to stay warm.
Yeah.
And you would change positions to take a turn. The guy in the bottom was the warmest.
Of course. It's just so brutal, and you can't imagine it, that people can do that to other people. But, I mean, obviously, if the guy in Afghanistan could drag a dog by a motorcycle, and, you know, I guess you can do it.
It's crazy, you know. War makes you crazy. War makes you stupid.
Yeah.
You know, I became good friends with 2 of those Marines that were pissed on the dead Taliban. They became 2 good friends of mine. And those guys were all up for Silver Stars. They had over 200 confirmed kills.
Right.
They were killing IED makers, bomb makers,
But you
everything.
pee on one corpse.
You pee on one corpse after they strung up a Marine in a tree, a dead Marine.
Oh, yeah, no, they could do anything to us.
And
Yeah.
they're dishonorable discharge. They were facing a dishonorable discharge. They did not get the medals, you know. And and forget about the scrutiny on CNN and the Commandant and the Marine Corps speaking out against them. I mean,
Cowards.
you know, those guys were who you want to win your war.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You need tough, crazy guys that'll piss on a corpse. And I'm pissing on a corpse. I mean, come on.
Well, what happened, the only reason why the video got out was because one of the Marines got injured by an IED, and the supply sergeant got a hold of it, went through the video, and leaked it.
You know, the first chapter about Drago is called, what is it? There's no such thing as a war crime, right? And he's talking, when he says that, he's referring to how they couldn't tell the difference between a civilian and a soldier dressed as a civilian, or a civilian who was forced to carry a bomb, or, you know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so anybody that they saw had to be considered an enemy.
Take Okinawa. Let's just say Okinawa was similar to Vietnam. The rules didn't apply to them.
Right,
When you took land in Okinawa, you owned it.
right,
If somebody moved, you killed it. You weren't going to jail.
right.
You could take a Japanese head, tie it to the front of your Jeep, and drive.
Yeah.
This was stuff that these guys did. And I think it was like 60% of the Japanese bodies on Saipan didn't have teeth and body parts and things like that.
I think in the book he says 40% of them didn't have heads or teeth.
Excuse my, I always get my math
You flipped
wrong.
it. Well,
Yeah.
it's Catholic school. I went to Catholic school. I'm terrible at math.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but no. So that, but I think that that really, I mean, that really is the reality of war, is it not? Like, regardless of what rules we have today and the politically correct, whiny little pains in the ass that make a big deal over pissing on corpses, they've never served. They would never serve. They have no clue what it's like to go through what you guys go through. Not even a clue. They can't even for a minute try to empathize with
We
that.
need guys like that.
Of course you
When
do.
we sleep down at night in bed, we need to know that the gates are being guarded by dudes like that, and we don't need to know how they guard those gates.
Right.
We don't.
Right. Exactly.
So-
as long as they keep you safe, right?
Right.
Yes. So, so he's telling these stories though, and when you're listening to them, are you relating at all to your experience, or are you comparing? I guess, are you comparing experiences? Is really the question.
I most recently, I'm trying to think where I was, and it was a guy from the European theater, and he was reflecting on what his buddies looked like after artillery strike, and I just literally had to, in a way, grab his hand and say, "Brother, I know what you're talking about. I know what that looks like." IED blast, artillery, whatever, an explosion, the body parts, the meat,
Right.
and it was a good bonding experience. He's got tears in his eyes. He's talking about what his friends look like and what the scene looked like of guys laying around after artillery. And I'm like, I'm with you, man. I know what you're talking about. And it's good. It's good. And I think I got a lot of veterans to open up to me because I was a young veteran. And I kind of guilted them into talking because a lot of people are like, oh, you can try talking to Jerry, but I don't know if he's going to say anything. And I would tell Jerry, let's say that Jerry's the World War II vet, I'd say, listen, our guy, you are the oldest generation of veterans. We are the youngest. We need to know how to live a successful life after combat. Mm-hmm. We need to know what to expect. Don't just disappear off the face of the earth and not give us a tool or a guidance thing to go by. Let me tell your story so younger veterans can hear it, that perhaps could prevent them from falling through the cracks of what they're dealing with. And that's kind of what went Rifle 2. So Rifle 1, I went greatest generation, ha ha ha, everybody's cool, everyone's awesome, everyone's heroes. And then Rifle 2, I went a little bit more controversial of some of the stories I've heard with, desertion, mutiny, guys that became alcoholics, guys that attempted suicide, a World War II veteran who I interviewed who just got out of prison at age 98 for killing a guy in 1959.
Wow.
Guys who lied to me. Guys who have been lying their whole lives about their service.
Are you talking like stolen valor lying, or just lying, like exaggerating what they did?
Exaggerating to the point it could be considered as stolen valor. Totally.
Really?
Yeah. Because once you start accepting tangible benefits that you are someone you're not, that's stolen valor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Like trips to Normandy.
Yeah. Oh, is this okay? Is this somebody that you actually knew? Mm-hmm. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
So they that's what I wanted to ask you. So wait, where is it here? Yeah, I think you're talking about nightmares and survivor's guilt here with Drago. And he says, one day you will say to yourself, was that real? Did that actually happen? Do you go through that too? And you too, Brian? Do you ever get that feeling of like, was that real? Like, what the hell did I go through?
I think it's a good question for Brian for sure.
No, I kind of accepted it.
You can't deny it.
From the start,
Yeah. How about you?
I look at Brian, I says, is this real? Is this kid really my friend? I mean, he makes me look like shit everywhere I go, So that's what I struggle with.
You can't deny when you see Brian that he went through something.
Yeah,
I could question.
So, Drago's experience, I mean, you're talking waves of Marines.
Yeah.
I had a guy tell me when he landed on Iwo Jima, he felt like he was floating. Like as soon as he exited the boat and hit the sand, he felt like his feet weren't even touching the ground. That's how of an outer body experience that was.
Yeah.
When the ramp went down, and and it was like, I never had anything like that. But
so you didn't have so in other words, it sounds to me like he's saying it was a surreal experience.
Yeah.
Like you weren't there. Because it was so unlike anything else that you've ever been through.
Yeah.
So your first time in country, you didn't, and you are coming up against some form of the enemy.
I'm going to say, and like I said, other vets might say that, but I think that because modern veterans have so much time training before you even allowed to qualify to go overseas, you spend almost a year training.
Okay.
3-4 months training in a mock Iraqi town and doing drills and life-saving methods. And, I mean, today's soldiers, tactfully and training-wise are better than the soldiers in World War II. That's just not saying that they're better humans. We just get more training.
Yeah, I got you.
Before you finish basic training, you get your rifle, you're a draftee, you get on a boat, you're a replacement for some unit. Okay, we're moving. That now you have to pass a series of tests as a battalion and a company to deploy.
Okay.
To be qualified to deploy with. And the life-saving measures alone, guys that probably could have lived in World War II that didn't because the basic soldier doesn't know how to apply a tourniquet and things like that.
Right.
So I think by the time a lot of modern post 9/11 veterans got in country, that they probably weren't having it as much as a surreal time as I think a World War II kid.
Yeah.
My opinion, I guess.
No, that makes sense though, because you're more even just from movies and
Television,
video
I'm
games.
watching the invasion of Iraq since a freshman in high school, and then I go,
Yeah, right.
5 years later.
Yeah. So you're a little more prepped for it,
I think.
before you even join the service. Yeah, I could believe that because you're right. Like you think about the Civil War guys; these guys are farmers or whatever. They're not. If they join the local militia, it's just to run around in uniforms and go through some maneuvers and then go drinking with the boys once a month. It's not like you're really going into war.
And in Joe's situation, I mean, they had to use bulldozers to move these Japanese bodies. I mean, there's no Iraq and Afghanistan vet that's seen that stuff.
Oh, it sounds like a horror show. I think in this
after a banzai charge, like
yeah. Well, and then that's the other thing too is the suicide bombers that they would have that they would strap anti-tank mines to. That you're talking about that one point where they're trying to take Sugarloaf, and there's 6 tanks ahead of them, heavy armored tanks, and they're sending suicide bombers strapped with anti-tank mines, and they would get under the tank and detonate themselves. How do you fight that enemy if you don't indiscriminately shoot everyone you see coming at you?
Correct.
You have to treat them all like the enemy.
And back then they didn't have, and at nighttime when you're doing guard duty, there's no night vision.
Oh my God. I know. The nighttime stuff in here is terrifying.
Scary.
With the bamboo spears that they would make and it just, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't gotten this book, you have to get this book. Yeah. So I'm assuming he's passed away, Drago.
Drago died November of 2018.
2018. Okay. So after you interviewed him for this book, did you remain friendly with him, or like did you become?
He didn't get to see the finished product. He knew I was writing his story. I went over his house and proofread it with him. His daughters and his son got to see the finished product, and they were so proud of it. They cried when I showed, on my first book signing, I showed clips of him signing the rifle and stuff, and it was good. So
the end of it kind of actually choked me up a bit when I was reading it before, and I'm not going to do it now because you almost got me. But yeah, there's got to be. So you guys were not in the same war. You're generations apart. You're young enough to be his great grandson.
Yeah.
Right. And yet there's a camaraderie. There has to be.
And the best thing about it, right? We were 2 different wars. He was wounded twice. I was never wounded. Seeing, the 2 different, obviously we're treated differently. But he would just say, forget about that greatest generation bullshit. Just knock it off.
Yeah.
Like, we did what we had to do. You did what you had to do. And sometimes I meet World War II veterans that are like, I'd say them, I'm in Iraq and Afghanistan. They go, oh, that must have been terrible. And I'm like, I didn't storm Omaha Beach. Like, what do you? But they think that the fact that you don't know who your enemy is like the biggest treacherous thing on planet Earth.
Yeah.
He's like, we knew who we were fighting. We knew who the enemy was. Like, you didn't know who your enemy was, and the obviously in Okinawa they had suicide bombers, but in Iraq, Afghanistan, the suicide bombers and the
Well, that's the thing is like if you take like Band of Brothers and the Pacific, you watch the 2 of them. The Pacific terrifies me because it's like another world and
more radicalized.
Oh my God! And the way there's that one scene where they're sending like the woman holding her baby, towards them and everything, and they don't know what to do, and she just blows up.
Of course,
like,
yes.
And people can't imagine that. Like civilians can't imagine that stuff.
Right.
But it's like I could watch a European theater World War II movie and be like, oh man, that sucks or whatever. But then when I watch anything with the Pacific, I don't know why the way they fought scares the shit out of me.
Absolutely. And I think that and today someone asked me in the crowd at the Eisenhower State where I was speaking, 10 in the morning. They were like, what are the differences in how they view the enemy between the guys who fought in Europe and the guys in the front in the Pacific? And I had to be brutally honest. Other than one guy, or two guys actually, other than two guys, a lot of the Pacific veterans that I interviewed did not forgive the Japanese.
Yeah, no.
Or they have no interest in meeting one
Right.
Japanese veteran and still had an underlying hate for them to this day.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that by what the words they used, how they described the enemy, the war trophies they had, there was just still this underlying hate on their memories of the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys didn't go to the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Saipan because the Japanese were invited. So the 2nd Marine Division, half the division association, boycotted their division reunion on Saipan in 94.
Good.
And because the Japanese were invited. And that happened a few times at Pearl Harbor and things like that. And when I meet guys who fought in the European theater, a lot of them are like, oh, he was just a soldier doing his job like me. And,
Yeah.
And I told people that today. I'm like, I'm not going to jump right to racism and say,
I was just going to ask.
it's not because these guys look different.
Yes.
And they set the stage for a macabre war when they did the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, right? So then they became sneaky JAPS, according to the veterans. Then you get to Guadalcanal and you're going on a patrol and you find a Marine tied to a tree with his testicles in his mouth.
No, they were brutal.
Then it just set the tone right then and there. Oh, and then let's not forget they didn't surrender. The Germans surrendered in droves.
Yeah.
They did. I have letters from soldiers, including my uncle, who said, as soon as a plane comes overhead and they drop one bomb, the Germans would come out of the woods.
Yeah.
The Japanese, you had to wipe out the whole island,
They were fanatical. As fanatical as the Germans were, the Japanese, they thought it was like the emperor was God on earth.
Yes.
And the things that they told them about our soldiers and what they would do to them if we captured them.
Of course.
Made them want, it's either die by, blowing yourself up or die at the hands of the enemy.
Marby Point in Saipan had civilians and soldiers jumping off the cliff.
The cliffs, yeah.
Instead of surrendering.
Yeah.
And,
which is terrible.
I remember I interviewed a guy from the 98th Infantry Division. Yeah. Or 97th. Oh, man.
Up in the 90s.
Yeah. The Deadeye Division. I forget which. And he said he looked into the ocean. Everybody was doing Harry Carry on themselves instead of surrendering. They're stabbing each other in the stomach.
Yeah, I can't.
And he said, I had to look away because it was awful sounding.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like just. And then I interviewed people that were there at Saipan using they had captured people and civilians using the megaphone to try to tell the civilians to stop jumping off the cliffs. We're not going to rape you. We're not going to eat you. And, I think they set the tone. So that's why I don't really jump to the racism thing, because people like to say, oh, well, look here, the Japanese are described as cockroaches and slant eyes and things like that. And yeah, we said some awful things and stuff like that. But I really think, that's not how we also had people like islanders from these islands helping us who look the same, and we didn't treat them like that.
Right.
It's because they weren't chopping off our testicles,
I mean, but what a bunch of C words we have become, where words that we use against an enemy that was putting our balls in our mouths while they tied us to trees and a million other horrible things.
Yeah.
That's worse, saying naughty words about them, than what they actually did to us that caused our men who lived through it to use those words.
I'll never forget when I was in boot camp, and there's a boot camp story, and my drill instructors were all Iraq veterans, invasion of Iraq vets. And this kid, God help him, he got shoved by one of the drill instructors, and this kid had the balls to turn around and go, you can't do that. My senior drill instructor came out and said, you can't do that. Is that where you're going to fucking tell some Iraqi when he's chopping your fucking head off? You can't do that?
Right.
And we got killed for that.
Yeah. Did you really?
Yeah, we got...
Is it true that they give them red cards to hold up now?
Not in my boot camp, not in Marine Corps. I heard there was a stress card thing that developed for a short time in Army boot camp. I can't comment on that. I don't think I think that was kind of fake news a little bit.
I hope that was
I think,
fake news.
Yeah.
Because we're doomed if that's the case.
Well, we're doomed for
We're
a lot
doomed
of
anyway.
other
I know.
reasons, you know. But yeah, and I said, he's right. You can't do that. What the hell's the enemy going to do to me when they catch the infidel, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, people don't get it. I think we have it too good in this country that people don't realize just how brutal life is elsewhere. And
there's certain stuff that we don't need to be sticking our noses in. One of them's the defense of our country and the defense against criminals too. You know, being in the police force now, it's like.
So how do you do that? So so now you're a cop. Are you currently a cop or okay? So you're a cop. You go from
I think I am.
you go from
I'm facing
combat
charges,
vet.
but
Are you?
yeah, for what happened in Minnesota. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. What did you have to do with that?
Just joking. I want to get your listeners all scared out so they log in.
No, but you go. How do you go from Marine, combat veteran Marine, to cop in Boston? Because it's similar but different.
Yeah, you know, I met a lot of friends who went right to the fire department. They're like, dude, I don't want to trade one battlefield for another. And I'm like, what do you mean? Come on, let's be cops. That's going to be awesome. We get free Dunkin' Donuts. And it was good until, like, you know, I guess until a lot of the different movements that started happening where it was like, it didn't matter how much of a good cop you are a Nazi, you suck. And because a cop killed somebody in Kentucky, you're in trouble for it in Boston. You know, bullshit. Absolute bullshit. And
Was there a defund the police movement in Boston?
Fudge, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did it succeed?
11, no. I'm getting paid more. I got paid more than I ever did because I had to get paid to the pro.
Oh,
the
so it's
protest.
overfund the police now.
Yeah, right.
Good.
And it's funny because now they absolutely kick themselves in the ass with the defund the police thing.
Yeah.
Because now guys don't want to go do their jobs and like, oh, officer, someone broke into my car last night.
Yeah.
Or, hey, man, I want to tell you something, but I don't want the camera. And, you know, well, you wanted this, buddy. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
There was out in Minnesota recently, there was a defund city council woman who got pretty badly beaten in a mugging. And now she can't say enough nice things about the police.
Yeah, you know, it's so...
And she's saying we need to do more to stop crime. It's like, well, that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, you know, honestly, the thing about George Floyd was absolutely horrendous, and that cop sucked.
Yeah.
He sucked. There's no way you should be standing on anyone's back, neck, anything for 8 minutes.
Absolutely.
You know, if you have to do it for a quick second to gain control or whatever.
Right.
But he had been doing the job wrong for years, you know, and didn't like people filming him, and he was trying to prove a point, and the guy was on fentanyl, and he died.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't do certain stuff. You don't know what people have taken. You don't know that stuff. So
How many times does a suspect or perpetrator, whatever, have to say, I can't breathe before you believe him?
yeah, right. Yeah, and not to
I mean,
mention
what
the
does your
guy,
training tell you?
George Floyd was out of, you know, he was out of it. He was loopy, but he wasn't like some of our guys we go to calls who were
No.
kicking us and biting us and breaking windows. I
Right,
mean,
right.
He
was subdued.
Yeah, he was.
Yes.
He was. You know, whatever. I got to be careful what I say because I'm still on the job and don't need to get.
Right, yeah.
But for my own opinion, but it's the thing that I went from being a hero in a Marine uniform to now. You never know if the guy that I'm about to deal with or going to a call with likes me or doesn't like me.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably 60-40 out there, you know, 60 being they like you, 40% absolutely not.
Well, that's actually encouraging to hear, though.
Yeah, because I know being out there, but the gifts I get, the coffees that are bought for me, the thanks I get.
Are you ever afraid that it was like poison?
Oh yeah, like if someone comes in that I don't know
and just hands you a coffee, you're not going to
give me
take
a gift card, fine, you know.
Yeah. But if you're standing in line at Starbucks and the guy behind you is like, put that on my tab, I'll pay for that.
That's all good.
That's
but
different.
I work to try to change people's minds too, you know. And I don't want you to like me. I just want respect, mutual respect. When you go to a call, I'm here for a reason because someone called. I'm not here because you look a certain way. I'm not here. None of that. That's it. And you know, we get in Boston, we get a gang problem. We have shootings every night, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And I work in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and they're amazing people. I mean, they're just awesome. Absolutely. I think maybe because like in their countries where they come from, the police probably beat them. So
Sure,
that's why it's so nice to us.
Yeah.
But really, if they don't want to deal with you, they just me no speak English, and if not, they're making us food, they're welcoming us, they're trying to dance with you, you know. So I work in a nice part of I work in East Boston, Mass. But I've almost lost my life more times as a cop than I ever did as a Marine. 100%.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. How does it? Which is more stressful?
Definitely the cop stuff. Absolutely. I didn't have an audience when I was doing my stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan.
There you
We
go.
were with each other, you know. I didn't have a
So
camera.
it's the people you're trying to protect who are the terrorists.
Absolutely. Like,
You're not. I'm saying that. Those are. I don't want you to get in trouble. Those are my words. It sounds like the people that you're employed to protect every day are the terrorists, while the terrorists, as terrifying as they may have been once in a while, weren't as bad because they weren't looking.
I feel like a lot of people who are anti-cop for no reason, meaning like, oh, I'm anti-cop because of what I see on Instagram or social media or TikTok. I'm not anti-cop because I actually had an anti-cop experience.
Right.
So I feel like these people are just a little. They don't know what it's like to be vulnerable. They don't know what it's like to be victimized. They don't, and so
Yeah, they got it too easy.
like it's a problem where I'm more. It's just odd that, you know, I got to be careful. I got to tread carefully. You go into a suburb 50 miles outside of Boston, you see Black Lives Matter yard signs all over the place. But you go into Boston,
You don't,
you don't see any of it. You know what I mean? So you know that's just like,
it's virtue signal.
you know, and I get respected more in Boston than I would in some suburb by some kids who've never seen a cop swear at somebody.
Sure.
So,
Because people in Boston understand what it's like to live in Boston.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they know that you're
And-
the
and
defense.
that includes multicultural neighborhoods
Sure,
too,
of course it does.
who I work with all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And I work with tons of black cops, you know, and Hispanic cops, and those guys are my brothers, and they're just like they were in the Marines.
I think the lesson is you can't go by what the news tells you to think about these people. Because it's with everything. If you talk to people who are actually there, who are actually the boots on the ground, they're going to tell you a completely different story.
Yeah, and we keep getting blamed for like non-cop killings. You know, it's like
Really?
Yeah, people keep talking about like the George Zimmerman thing, like it's another one of law enforcement. It's like no, it wasn't us.
Zimmerman.
You know,
Oh, that guy.
But I bring him up because we do have a couple of crazy.
Vigilantes.
Yeah, the neighborhood watch guys that get us dragged into crap.
They remind me of kind of reenactors. Like they're wannabes, you know, they're pretending.
Yeah, dude, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, someone the other day said, hey, these 3 guys are dealing drugs in the corner. I get out there, I prone out all these guys, I'm searching them, and I see fucking, god damn it, I see mall cop guy giving me the thumbs up as he drives away. It was him. Here I am putting this stuff back in their pockets. I'm so sorry, guys. Deal drugs wherever you want, honestly. You know what? I'll buy some. What do you got? You know, like, you feel so bad.
All because Paul Blart called them.
Exactly.
Called
I'll never
in.
forget that. I hear the engine roaring, and it's him and his
Oh, my God.
minivan giving me the thumbs up as he's driving away. I'm like, dude.
You know, he was the hall monitor in middle school.
Yeah, but it's guys like him who get cops jammed up. You know, guys that want to be proactive cops, make a good arrest, a gun arrest, get a award, and
Yeah.
really, you know, now you're strip searching some senator's son because it's the raw guy. You know?
Right.
But it's you gotta tread carefully. I have a good sense of humor.
You need that, right?
Knock on wood. 10 years, not one complaint against me.
No, now that you did this show, you'll get a complaint.
Whatever.
How can you talk to that bald guy? Bald guy.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's
That's what they're complaining about.
I got to make it to the finish line. I want to retire as a police officer. I hope I can. I think I will. But, you know, it's tough when majority of cops do not want to go out and be proactive.
Right.
We'll answer our radio, we'll go. But you don't want to be proactive because you don't want to get jammed up.
Yeah.
You know?
Which is a real shame.
Guys don't want to be on films. Guys don't want to be part of famous YouTube videos. Guys don't want to be accused of doing things. And it's tough. It's tough. And now in major cities, you know, sometimes the criminals run the show and they have more rights than you do.
Yeah. Well, it seems like they do.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to have your job. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the... remember we were saying before that if you were in Brian's case, we'd both be catatonic, right? I couldn't handle 2 days. One day, I could push through. But the second day would ruin me as a cop. I couldn't deal with that.
You could probably be a cop in Mongolia. I think they could just do whatever they want. You know?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, in that case, give me a horse and a 6-shooter and I'll be a cop in Mongolia. That'd be fun.
Whip.
But I couldn't do that here in the United States.
Yeah.
All right, Andy. I think I've taken enough of your time.
I think this has been awesome.
I really did too. I really enjoyed talking to you. I could talk to you for
Well, I want to present you
12
this
hours.
book. I'd like to sign it to you too. And stuff
I would
like
love for
that.
you to
So,
sign it.
thank
Here
you.
you go. Thank you very much. And Brian, thank you for talking to us. I know you're not crazy about talking, but I'm glad you did.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and I know you guys probably don't like hearing this, but I must say thank you for your service. I truly mean that.
Thank you.
And thank you for writing The Rifle and The Rifle 2. Where can they get the books? Anywhere?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Yep.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can come and look at a signed copy on my bookshelf here in the studio if you're a patron over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. And thanks to Eric Dorr for setting this up. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for signing our Wall of Fame and for the book.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
I should have said I worked for Detroit Police Department.
Yeah, you should have.